In this video, we are talking all things time and mind. How do you change your mind to change your time? My guest today is a mentor of mine. He's a friend. And above all, he is an amazing author. So he's now about to publish his 14th book. And I would love Tom to tell us why he thinks changing your mind will help you to change your relationship with time. Tom, welcome.
Great, and thank you for a lovely introduction.
I think it's a very inadequate introduction for you, Tom, because you are just so prolific as an author. And I know you're also a meditation teacher, a mindfulness teacher, and you create meditations and so on. Please tell us about your books, your meditations, and how comes you have become such a master of time.
Well, that's a great question. I think to answer that is that I've got to say first off is that I didn't plan to do any of these things. I was a bored IT consultant in my mid-40s. I just exited my second business, didn't know what to do with the rest of my life, and I ended up writing a book by accident, and then that led me to a career as an author and author's mentor. I sort of supported my writing my books by helping other authors to write their books. In fact, I do remember one time when we created 3 fantastic books of yours, Karma and Diamond.
We did. I mean, there was a time when I started writing a book. It was called, actually at the time, Kick-Ass for the Soul, and I got a contract for that too, to get it published. Yeah. And then somehow that over time that changed shape, and it became from going from a how-to book, it's become like a real novel, like a journey of self-discovery across continents and lifetimes. And I really have to acknowledge you for your coaching and for your support that you provided that time, because honestly, I started not knowing what I was doing.
Well, like me too. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. And what happened was authors just approached me like you did to say, can you help me? And specifically authors that were stuck. So I had no coaching tools at the time. So I went and studied a bit of NLP and some hypnotherapy and some past life progression. And kind of what happened was I used to write these books. Someone introduced me to meditation, and I thought meditation was like a waste of time. And I found out on the days that I meditated, I seemed to get more things done. And I seemed to have a better day. And when I didn't meditate, it was like pushing water uphill. So I started to research this as an engineer more and more. And as I wrote my books, I'd record meditations to go with the book. So you'd read the book, and then you'd experience the meditative state to help you get rid of blocks or to experience light bulb moments. It was my 3rd book that I wrote, and those sort of things. And I really thought I was an author with meditations as a sort of accessory, if you know what I mean. And then about 3 years ago, I got discovered by this app, Insight Timer, which I know you're on now. And they asked me to upload them on one of my meditations. And all of a sudden, they really took off, and people loved the English accent, the fact I don't take it seriously, I'm not that worthy, the sense of humour is in there. And overnight, I became this globally recognized meditation teacher, even though I've never spent any time in an ashram, and I literally do make things up as I go along. So really this transition from author to author's mentor to meditation teacher was completely undesigned and unplanned. But all the way through it was this engineer trying to understand how things work. I used to be an engineer in the TV industry. I was fascinated by how television cameras work. And then I became an engineer of the mind and kind of read lots of neuroscience, lots of mysticism books. And trying to put the two together, say, well, these things, these techniques, which are, some people might call them woo-woo, you can actually get real tangible results out of them. And I'm very, very practical. So if someone comes to me with a problem, I'll come up with a meditation or a technique or a procedure you can go through to get rid of that problem, make it go away. I mean, a good example of that is a guy in my village who used to go to Brazil every week. He'd fly on there on the Sunday, come back on the Thursday, sleep Friday, Saturday, not see his family, fly back on the Sunday again. And this is a non-spiritual guy. He said, any way you can do meditations for jet lag? And I said, well, I haven't got one, but I'll record one. And it works a treat. It's an astral traveling technique, which is very woo-woo, but it works. And I've got so many people now flying around the globe with 0 jet lag. So that's a great example of how we can use some of these kind of strange techniques for real 21st century modern day results.
That's really amazing. And before we start, I really want you to share the book that is coming out in 2 days.
Okay, we'll do, yeah. It's called Just for Today. It's the slowest book I've written. So the quickest book I wrote, I started on the 3rd of September one year, and I had the Kindle version and the print version in my hand within 3 weeks. It's called This We Know. It's only a 12,000 word book. And so one of the things I do is a
little bit into the screen.
Yeah. So one of the things I do is I can teach people how to change the speed of time to get more things done in less time. So writing a book quick is one of the things I do and I teach other people. This book has taken over 2.5 years, and I'll explain why. Because it's got in it a little message that goes out every day by email called the Just for Today emails. They go out to a couple of thousand people. And in May this year, I got approached by a lady called Siri Sticklesack-Offley, and she said, would you like them illustrated? And I said, well, I love them illustrated, never thought of doing it. So she started illustrating them. And basically, what I did was take my 75 of my favorite ones that I've written over the last 2 years. She's illustrated them, and we put them into a book. And we made it into a workbook. So the idea is that you read, and not only did I write this book slowly, but you read it slowly. You do one a day, and you sketch or draw your thoughts that the Just for Today inspires on the page. And it's a book that will just transform. In 75 days, you'll just have a different view of life. It's really simple. They're all upbeat. They're all a bit quirky. They all make you think in a slightly different way. And I guess that's the nuance of all the work that I do, is I just want people to start their day off in a slightly different way, think a new thought each day, and then it's not that thoughts become things, but thoughts are things. And what you are thinking manifests in your world, not in a kind of secret kind of way, the secret book, but literally we see the world as a mirror, or the world is a mirror of what we're thinking. So we think that the glass is half empty, then the world will present the glass half empty world to us. If we think the glass is half full, it'll be half full. I like a world where the glass is over brimming and just the flow is just coming out all the single time, every single time. So that's currently the slowest book I've ever written, because it's taken 2.5 years. But I'm just about next year to publish an even slower one. I started writing my novel before my very first book. That's 13 books ago, and I'm going to publish that on my birthday next year, because this year I spent my 59th birthday, my best friend from school's funeral, which is a bit sad. But that inspired me to think, well, we've only got a certain limited time, and I've got this novel with some wonderful things in it that I want to share. And I thought I'm going to get it out for my birthday next year. So that'll be my 50th book. And that's even slower. That's taken me about 13 years.
So how do you manage with the mind monkeys? Because one of the things that zaps us the most in terms of our effectiveness is our internal mind chatter, right? What I call the mind monkeys, okay? And what you're saying is that you are so productive and you're really effective with the action that you do take. What have you found to be effective in dealing with the noise of the mind monkeys? How do you keep your mind in check from all that chatter, which is the thing that gets in the way of most people's effectiveness?
Well, the normal human mind, and it's only the normal human mind, is only capable of having one thought at a time. So if you think about what you're having for supper this evening, your focus will go away from what you're doing right now. If you're mulling over a conversation, perhaps yesterday, that didn't go so well, you'll lose focus on the now. If you're in the internal mind chatter mode, you'll lose focus on what you're doing right now. And if you're open to interruptions, either interruptions from, I don't know, you left social media open and this sort of stuff, so you get little notifications from Facebook and emails coming in. You can have those interruptions, but you can also get interrupted by yourself, like, oh, I'm just going to have a cup of tea, on those sort of things. So I think the normal human mind is about 10% efficient as standard. And what I learned when you meditate every day, if you meditate for 10 to 20 minutes every day, what happens is you're more able to stay in the meditative state throughout the whole day. And what happens is not that you don't have any thoughts at all, but you start to have a different relationship with your thoughts. So let me give you an example. If I'm writing and I'm in that focus mode, and we'll talk a little bit about how to get into the zone a bit later on, because I think that's really important, is that when you're in the focus mode, if a thought comes in nowadays, I go, oh, well, that wasn't a thought I'm having. or if an interruption comes in, that wasn't an interruption I'm planning. I look at it from a slightly different perspective and say, well, maybe that can help me with what I'm writing right now. And one of these things came in today. I was just writing another chapter of the novel, and this thought came in about the number 12. And I went, oh, this is really important. I wasn't thinking about the number 12. So I started to read research online about the numerology of the number 12, and I ended up writing a much better chapter than the one I was thinking. So it's not about the mind monkeys. It can be useful because some of them don't just come from the head, they come from our lower mind centers. We can get them from the gut and the heart specifically, and they can be guidance that we should go in a slightly different way. We can also get interruptions from the outer mind, what I call the collective consciousness as well. So this idea about the number 12 came in from outside. It wasn't an internally generated thought, and I was right to allow myself to be interrupted. So the mind monkeys can have several sources. It can be the internal chatter, because let's say I was thinking, if I was going through this process, oh, you're an idiot, Tom, you shouldn't be writing this novel, no one's going to read it, and all that sort of stuff. That would be my internal mind, the devil on my shoulder talking to me, if you know what I mean. And so what meditation allows us to do is to have this new relationship with thoughts, so we know where they're coming from, what sent them, and their purpose. Yeah.
Yes, and that's the point, isn't it? Is to kind of really get acquainted with what is internal noise, as in the mind monkey noise. I like to distinguish that, as opposed to, you said it was a thought coming from outside. I'd rather think that was the inner voice somehow, the deeper inner voice, which is the purer, more intuitive knowing, the voice of knowing, if you like, the inner voice, which is connected to that aspect of you that is beyond the mind monkey chatter, beyond the yak yak yak, the waves, if you like, of the mind. Rishi Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutras, Sage Patanjali, he compiled the Yoga Sutras. He actually talks about this in the second sutra. Sutra means thread. So in the second aphorism, basically, he writes about yoga chitta vritti nirodha, that yoga, the union of the if you like, you could say union of what the higher self, if you like, with the human being you know yourself to be. That happens when you begin to get a handle, like you begin to get a rein on the thoughts. You're able, like the waves of the thoughts that come and go, we kind of get attached to them, thinking they're important, they're valid, that's me. But actually, that's just like the ocean just churns out, waves. So the mind churns out thoughts, and you have to kind of become very savvy at distinguishing which are relevant, which are not, and really calming that whirlpool down, and so that you can actually avail of what's useful, as in the number 12 that you were talking about today, just now, versus all the other stuff like who's going to want to read this, and you're rubbish, and all of that stuff.
Absolutely. And one good question to ask yourself is if you've got this internal mind chatter going on, you can say, well, what accent is that chatter in? Because you can
That's a good way.
Different thoughts have got different flavors. I wrote a book called Flavors of Thought, which describes that.
You did write that. Yes, you did. Flavors of Thought. I remember that book.
That's right. And if somebody is doing the speaking, who exactly is doing the listening? That's a good question to ask yourself. And actually, just by asking those questions internally, that is a very good technique to quieten the mind down. And sometimes you get a thought coming in. I was awake this morning. I've been awake a lot recently, between 4 and 5, and that's not because I'm worried about things. But when I'm in this mode of writing a book, wherever these messages are coming in, they wake me up with stuff, and so I get whole chapters. I come out of the dream mode.
You're downloading, like a download.
Yeah. Sometimes I've got to say, well, you just be quiet. But what you can do, to get back to sleep, you can say, that's a great idea. I've got it. I'm not even going to wake up and write it down. Send it to me again at 8 o'clock when I'm starting writing, and you get the thought back again straight away. Amazing.
And of course, the thing about which accent is it in, etc. That's a great interrupter, because the whole thing about the internal mind chatter is simply that, the fact that it happens and we haven't distinguished it as being the mind monkeys, as being internal chatter. That's the whole point, is that the moment you can have little tools to help you to interrupt it, so you can become aware of it's happening, but at that point you have a choice in whether you engage with it whether it continues or whether you calm the mind down and kind of go, okay, now, thank you very much. Thanks for sharing, and moving on, so, you know what I mean? So that's the whole point. But I love the idea about like, which accent did that happen in? Because I do speak, I speak like, well, I'm learning my 7th language right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's true. Sometimes you have these different accents. It's very true. It's a good film. So, Tom, we were talking about, so again, in the same vein, there's this thing about the right brain and the left brain. And I think, again, we're talking about it, inner voice versus the mind monkey noise and so on. The useful inner voice. Now, there's also, how they arrive into our nervous system through the brain, as it were. The right brain, left brain. Lots been said about the left brain being rational, the right brain being creative. And I know, as someone who's been meditating since I was since, I don't know, for the last 25 years, since I was very, very young, that there is this place where, I don't have that thing about right brain, left brain. I can really, work the two together more effectively than I used to be able to do, purely through the tool of meditation. So what do you want to say about that? That what techniques have you seen work? I mean, meditation is one, but of course there are so many different meditations as well.
Yeah. Well, yoga as well. Yoga is union.
Well, to integrate the two lobes together.
Yeah, yoga is union of lots of things. One of the things that yoga does and the yoga breathing does is to unify the left and right brains, as well as unifying the above with the below as well. But I think that one of the things about left and right brain is that it's an urban myth that the left brain is logical and the right brain is creative, and that came from research of a guy called Roger Sperry, very intelligent guy in the 60s, and he did some amazing work with epileptic patients, and he severed the corpus callosum, and it found that it made their brain to go quiet. But the biggest thing he discovered is the right brain has got no awareness of the left brain if you sever the corpus callosum, the butterfly structure in the middle, and the left brain's got no awareness of the right brain. And so what happens is you end up with a split brain person that's got two different experiences of the world. And so in those days, people would do research on brains that were damaged. Someone's had a stroke, someone's had some injury, someone's had this severing, and he won a Nobel Prize for his research. But nowadays, what they can do is they can anesthetize a bit of a brain or a whole half of a brain, someone that's actually well and healthy, and ask them how they feel. And so there's a great book called The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist. Massive book.
What's it called?
The Master and His Emissary. And
the Master and its Emissary.
Yeah. And the master's the right brain, and the emissary is the left brain. But the emissary thinks he's the master, and the master thinks he's the emissary. And what he's done so much research, this guy. The notes in his book are bigger than any of my books. So it's a massive book to read, but there's a great 11-minute YouTube video you can get to summarize the book. And what it looks like is this is still a generalization, but it's a more accurate generalization than the old of a myth. Is the right brain looks at new things. It looks at the big picture and it learns new experiences. And the left brain tends to run, and this is just the outer lobe of the brain, tends to do learned responses and things that the right brain has passed it to do, if you know what I mean. So they're communicating all the time. And it used to be thought that this structure in the middle of the brain was the communication structure between the left and right brain, but it turns out it's the inhibitor. So it temporarily inhibits the left brain so the right brain can get on and do something, and then it inhibits the left brain so the right brain can do it. But it's doing this all the time without us even knowing about it. And what happens when you meditate and when you do yogic breathing? There's one where you do alternate nostril breathing and stuff like that.
Nadi.
That's the voice, yeah. And I can never remember it. I knew you'd know it. And when you do that, when you breathe through the right nostril, it energizes the left brain. And when you breathe through the left nostril, it energizes the right brain. If you do that before you do a creative task, what happens is that both hemispheres engage at the same time. And this is what happens. Two things. One is it shuts down the inner chatter. And two, it changes the speed of time. You enter what I call extended me time, EMT. And time seems to change its nature, so you seem to get more things done in less time. Because remember, the right brain, it doesn't just sit, the left brain sits inside space and time, the right brain sits everywhere and everywhere else. And when you get into this extended me time state, you jump into this lovely, squidgy, squashy time. And so your task seems to get done in the linear time that you allocated to it.
So essentially, it gets you present. Basically, especially if it calms the mental noise down, it gets you in the moment. And when you immediately, as you land in the moment now, then time stretches because there's only the now, the now, the now, the now.
Exactly that. And also, the other thing that happens is if I'm working on my book Soul Wave, and I'm not thinking about Smita, for example. If I think about you, if I come into your mind in the middle of the day, every chance is I'm thinking about you at that particular time. You're picking it up, especially when you work with somebody closely over the years and you're at the same sort of wavelength. So if someone comes into my mind, I know they're thinking about me, and often the phone will ring about 2 or 3 minutes later. If you calm the mind down, so you're not thinking about other things, you reduce the number of people that can potentially interrupt you by calling you or sending you an email or something like that.
It all comes down to being present. I don't want to take away your thunder because I'm sure you have more techniques to give with regards to timefulness. You've created this term, which I love the fact that you come up with all these amazing terms, your zone show, for example. That's a fantastic term. So for people that don't know Tom, he has this show called The Zone Show. It's an audio, like a podcast. Amazing resource. What is it? TheZoneShow.com?
TheZoneShow.com,
Yeah, perfect. Incredible stuff on there. I'm sure if you guys are interested in all the things that Tom is about, there's loads more of that. And he's interviewed some incredible people as well. So timefulness, that's the latest term that I have known you to coin. And I want you to tell us, what is it and how can we benefit from this?
Well, it's got several aspects to it. The first is that when you practice mindfulness meditation, you do end up in a timeful state where not only do you get more things done in less time or in the time you've allocated to them, but the world seems to give you things that you need just at the right time. And a good example is that number 12. I didn't know I needed to know about the number 12. It just popped in. A good example is when I just seem to get enough clients at the right time to give me enough money so I can do all the things I want to do. So I'm never fretting about I'm never worried about sales or marketing. My marketing is my content generation, and I'm trusting in the universe that people come along in the right time. So you end up in this just in time mode. And one of the reasons you do that is because with a quiet mind, you notice opportunities and serendipities. You notice the number 12 coming in. And the other thing that you notice is if you're procrastinating and you're not getting things done, it's not necessarily that you're not feeling that lack of you haven't got feelings of lack of self-worth and maybe I shouldn't write this book because people will think I'm an idiot and this sort of stuff. It could be that there's a better time, and
there's a better time for it. Time is not right now.
Exactly.
So being in the right time at the right place.
Yeah. So part of timefulness is getting back into natural time. The minutes, seconds, weeks, months do not exist in nature. We made them up just so I could arrive on time today to be interviewed you at the right time. So it's very useful for that, but in some ways we've been enslaved by it as well. And if you get back into natural time, so for me, my natural time is I will write between 8 and 11 o'clock in the morning. I won't see any clients till after 11. And then I'll do 11 till 3 on client work. Then I walk the dogs every afternoon, which is really important because that gets you into the fresh air and gets you breathing again and you inspire, which is kind of useful. And then I do this networking between about 4 and 6 every day. So that's my time. And then over the days, I do different things on slightly different days of the week. I always have weekends off, which is really important. But I also work to moon phase, which is really important. The months are completely unnatural. So February is 10% less than every other month. But if you've got a sales target, you're still expected to hit your sales target in February.
Yes.
It's not an equal 12th of the year, so that's really bad for a salesperson in February. So months and the moon phase, the moon has a massive effect on our consciousness and our creativity. And if you tune into the moon phase and you run projects to the moon phase, you go with the flow. I also worked with the seasons. So I noticed after my third book, I wrote them all in spring. So I didn't even try and write them any other time. So this book, the Just for Stay book, I published it in autumn, but I didn't write it in autumn, if you know what I mean. Yeah, it's a book that I just produced And I've been writing them all through the seasons. I just write one of those a day. But my major books, my major projects are all done in spring. It's almost like springing forward and then falling back and harvesting.
So what you're saying is that you have a rhythm which works really well for you, and you have found that rhythm in terms of time, managing how much you do and when you do it, that works for you. So for you, writing early in the morning. For me, writing my books, I wrote them, all of them in the afternoon. I found the morning is my yoga time. That's kind of like when I get up early in the morning, drive in, I go where I need to go. I also teach. So, for me, the afternoon work, because everything was done. The day was kind of things I needed to get done were done, and then I was able to spend. And then also you mentioned 2 hours, but it could be 4 hours for somebody else. To do a good chunk of work for themselves. You have to figure out what that is for you, I guess.
Yeah, and also if you're a busy mum, you might have to write before the kids get up in the morning. I know lots of mums that write in the evening when the kids go to bed. So it all depends on your circumstances, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Of how and when you can write.
We're talking about managing time and listening to the inner voice to guide you, to get you to be in the right place at the right time, to kind of have your life flow with time, easily and effortlessly, with more ease and grace, as it were. Actually just switching the modality of the time to which you're working, integrating it with external time, but really tuning into the internal system, like the internal GPS, as it were, really helps to make things flow with more ease and grace. Would you say?
You're right. Yeah. No, I've launched this program called Mindfulness-Based Time Management. It's an 8-week self-study course, and on it, I've been writing and writing articles around it, and I've invented. When I say invented, they around 3 terms for time. One is extended me time, EMT. So these are replacing GMT. And this is the zone you
See, I tell you,
I've got another one called,
phrases is amazing.
I've got one IMT, which is in the inner me time. Some neuroscientists in Scandinavia about 10 years ago discovered when they flashed an image in front of someone's eyes in an MRI scanner, they get a response from the nerves in the gut. But the nerves in the gut flashed 5 seconds before the image was flashed. So this is the source of precognition. So often if you know someone's about to ring, someone's ringing on the phone, it's because your gut mind has actually told you about something. Your heart mind runs to a slightly different time continuum as well. And I also coined this term outer mind time. Now, outer mind time is the collective time of the super consciousness. And you know what gives us the clue as to where these thoughts are coming from? It's like you say things like, oh, I really wish I trusted my gut on that, or my heart wasn't in it. Then you're ignoring the inner conversations, and these thought forms arise several seconds before you're consciously aware of them. If you say something like, oh, I just got this number 12 off the top of my head, or I've had this thought at the back of my mind, that's an indicator that something's come in from outside you. And one of the things I'm doing at the moment with this novel is it's a future history. It's like a science fiction book written several years from now, because I started writing it 13 years ago. Some of the things I wrote 13 years ago have come to pass. Specifically, Elon Musk has got 2 technologies that he's working on right now that I forecast were going to happen. So what I'm doing is almost tuning into the future, and it's a really good technique. So this is, let's say it's a fictional story, it might not happen, right? Or it could be it's true and I'm channeling into the future, in the same way that Leonardo da Vinci channeled helicopters and parachutes and things like that 400 or 500 years ago. What's interesting though, by using this technique, you can actually save a lot of time, because if you think about memories, past memories, they exist in the collective consciousness, and we can tap into them because we have this forward arrow of time. But there's nothing in the quantum physics that doesn't say we can't have future memories as well. And if you're writing a book, there's a version of you in the future that knows all the words that you need to write. So all you do is you tap into that person, and you get the words sent from the future back to the now. And you end up writing your first draft, roughly what everyone else's third draft would look like, because you're kind of tuning into this version of you, which you highly resonate with, if you know what I mean.
Interesting. I like the distinctions that you've added, which is simply not just the inner voice, the inner guidance, the GPS, etc., but the internal GPS, as it were, but also externally tapping. So talking about this idea that the mind is always churning up thoughts, but there are, and majority of the times, these thoughts are not they're neither ours. They simply happen to be floating around, and they're just what's there in collective consciousness, as it were. But then there's also the really useful aspect of tuning into, but really listening and allowing this, what you call super consciousness, the stuff beyond the collective consciousness that is actually can be very helpful. And we say, I'm channeling something. I don't really like that term very much, but it's really about listening intently, for a new thought or something that may not be yours and may not even be in the collective.
Yeah, because that word channeling, a lot of people think it's like mediums channeling the dear departed, but actors in Hollywood now talk about channeling the role and the part and stuff like that. I'm using it in that context.
It's so contaminated, that term, channeling.
I know.
So contaminated. Yeah.
But it's time that we could, well, maybe we need a new term for, I might call it also hyper imagination or something like that, because that's what it is. You just get into a new level of imagination.
Interesting, but it's not imagination, though, is it? It's actual information, which I know what you mean by imagination. Imagination kind of implies that it's something that you kind of fantasized in a sense, but this is beyond that, right? What you're talking about in terms
of... If you imagine it, it might be from you going out. This is coming in from the outside. So it's sort of reimagination or something like that. There'll be a term that we need. I was uncomfortable channeling too, because it's got so many connotations with mediumship, and I'm not a great fan of that sort of stuff. But I think it's I think enough people are using it that we need to redefine it, and to become a channel is actually quite a service as well. So I don't just channel words from my books, but I channel techniques, I channel in useful information for clients. So if I met a new author client, for example, I'd always get their book title really quick, and then because I was a helpful sort of guy, I'd tell them the book title. And then I realized after a while I was stopping their fun of finding it, discovering it. So I'd hold it back, and then we'd listen it in a different way. And I often get information for people very useful in a healing context as well. So you can meet somebody, and you can read their aura or what terms you want to use for that, and you can elicit very quickly what their issue might be. And so this is either it's coming from them to you, or it's coming from the collective consciousness through you about them. And these are kind of useful things to do. It works very well also with animals, with plants, and any living thing. So it's not just a human thing. We're all effectively channels for this universal chi, this universal energy.
I've also heard you talk, Tom, about stretching time.
Yeah. Well, stretching time happens. This is the extended me time, when basically you just get enough done in time. And you've experienced this, I'm sure, when you've been late for an appointment and you've been driving, and all of a sudden you seem to get there just at the right time with about a second to go, and there's that parking space outside. So we're all natural at stretching time. And time is this thing where we got these seconds that have been invented, been man-made effectively, but actually time is completely variable depending on the speed and the nature of our thoughts. And collectively, we've agreed to have these seconds, but also collectively we can undo it and go to a different time continuum. And the easiest way to do this, if you're working either one-to-one with somebody or in a group, is to slow the rate of breathing down. So obviously all your yoga that you do is all about is controlling the breath. If you slow your breath down, time expands quite magically.
Yes, that's a really great access that you've just given there to use the breath as the access to slow things down, and time included. We talk about breath control, but I'd like to think it's conscious breathing. My experience of teaching pranayama and doing pranayama is it's conscious breathing as opposed to controlling. There is a certain amount of control, of course, because you're using a technique, so you are directing the flow of breath in certain ways. But it's very much more about getting in tune with inhaling and exhaling, or holding the breath in a specific pattern, and once you get connected to like do it consciously, it almost does itself in a sense. That's why kind of have thought about this term, whether it's breath control or whether it's conscious breathing. For me, pranayama occurs very much as conscious breathing, just as an aside.
I've got a lovely meditation which people use to get to sleep to, and what you imagine that there's a hand beneath your back and a hand on your belly, and you're being breathed by these hands, and it takes you back to that lovely breathing that a baby would do, and you see the belly going up and down, because we only use our intercostal muscles most of the time. We only use the diaphragm, and this is a great thing to do actually. If you want to get to sleep, just allow yourself to be breathed. Or actually, if you want to supercharge, then you can actually do some diaphragmatic breathing just to get your inspiration up, and you can imagine that, you can do the nostril breathing, but you can also imagine that the breath starts in the left side of your belly, goes across your heart center and goes into the right brain. Then you can flip over and go from the right side of your belly over to the left brain. And these are super things you can do if you're just about to start a creative task. Or if you're flagging, let's say you're marketing executive and you're flagging in the afternoon, and there's some pressure to get a new campaign designed or done. These are great ways to give yourself a shot of inspiration.
And what you've just described in that technique that you just shared with visualizing the breathing starting in one side of your body and then crossing over at the heart, going to the opposite side of the brain, and so on. That is, we are talking about the Ida and the Pingala Nadi, in the spine. We talk about Kundalini energy. So there's the two, what we call nadis. Nadis are, actual direct translation of nadis is kind of a pipe or a tube. But they're like you might have meridians, as it were. But these are channels that actually the Ida and Pingala, the male and the female, the one in the middle is called the Sushumna Nadi. So they meet there at that point. So,
and what's great about this is, so it's obviously you are an amazingly qualified yoga master. You know all these things. You've studied this. You did it years and years and years. As I said, I've never been to an ashram to study meditation. Yes. I make all of these things up empirically. And the thing.
No, I'm going to stop you. You didn't make them up. You have a knowing about it.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. My point is that this stuff is common knowledge, and when you get into this mode, we use the word channeling just because that's it. It's collective information that comes in, and we can use it, and that's lovely confirmation that you do something which you kind of make up, and then someone says, "Oh yeah, that's this," and the agents learned about this. But what's great about what I enjoy about it most is I feel like a kid in a sweet shop, all these techniques, and then you create some new things, and always my ignorance and this naivety is actually a great advantage, because I don't come on with any previous knowledge, and I come up with brand new things that people haven't thought about before in a new context, using the ancient wisdom in a modern new context. That's why I call it. Some people call it spiritual engineering. I call it temporal alchemy. I think it's a lovely.
What do you call it?
Temporal alchemy.
Temporal
alchemy is. What? Alchemy is transmutation. It's taking one thing and then transmuting it into something else, or lead into gold. This temporal alchemy is taking the passage of time in all its modes and doing things with it. So pulling out future memories and bringing them back, working with clients that have got problems in the past and seeing the past life in the aura and healing it. So that all about bringing things into the now and doing things in the now so people are more effective.
So, Tom, another thing that I know is a real zapper in terms of productivity is procrastination.
Yeah.
Now, whenever people talk about procrastination, there's this thing that's always said, oh, you procrastinate because of fear, because there's at the root of procrastination is fear. But I know that in my 20s, something shifted with me in terms of my relationship to time, and from being somebody who was like a real action girl. I think of something I want to do, I go and do it. It's done. Being really productive. But I found that at that point, I started to have something arise, which was an inner awareness, like something started to speak to me, which had me think like, maybe I shouldn't do this now. Now is not the right time. We touched on this a little bit earlier about, timing and the right time to do something. But in general, in the Western context, procrastination, like wanting to do something and putting it off until a little bit later, is so frowned upon. And yet, I do want to come back to that point about actual, like the right timing for that thing to be done more easily, effortlessly, because I do believe that, the inner voice, that the part of you that is connected, to again, consciousness is a very nebulous term, but, to that higher consciousness, as it were, then, it knows it's not the right time to do it now. Like, if you put a lot of effort into doing this particular thing now, it may not be successful because people are not ready for it. I had a situation like that with a line of clothing that I did years and years ago. I designed a line of clothing. It was, in the end, I sold it to Harrods and Phoenix in London, and they loved it, except they couldn't merchandise it with anything else that they had in the store, but they loved it. Things sold. And it turns out, and so these were like fusion garments. They were like East-West silks and stuff, which are now so common. But in those days,
ahead of your time. Yeah.
13 years ahead of my time, Tom. Do you know what I made that mean? I made that mean that I was a bad designer. It was a hobby of mine because I was working full time in a company. But I did that, and I went to India and I sourced my fabrics, and it was a 2-year range that was that it took me to create. But when they didn't reorder with me, I made it mean that I'm a terrible designer. I don't know what I'm doing, etc., etc. But in fact, it was just too far ahead of its time. At that point, 13 years later, and even to date, these types of styles are just inundating our shops, Yeah.
So you're actually there's two sources. Procrastination is a symptom. That's the symptom, but there's causes that either fears or that it's just the universe trying to tell you there's a better time. But if you find yourself being creatively uncreative, so let's say that you weren't getting anything done at all and you were just playing computer games and on Twitter and Facebook and not actually doing anything creative, that's a good sign that there is a fear in operation. And classically the fears are fear of failure, so you do everything else other than trying, so then you won't fail. The fear of the unknown, so you don't want to you want to do anything new. There's the fear of ridicule, people saying that you're silly, or those clothes are good, or that novel's really stupid. And then there's the fear of success and of being magnificent. I fell into that trap because I found out that I've been successful twice in my life financially, but those times I was really stressed. So I started to associate success and stress together. So these are the fears, and the symptom of procrastination then is the reason that procrastination is about a fear is because you become creatively uncreative doing other things. When it's about timing, it's because there's resistance. So you've actually created something. So you actually haven't not been creative, but you've been creative, and then you end up hitting a brick wall. Then it's either because you're ahead of your time, or there's a better way of doing it. So, for example, with clothes, you don't have to produce the clothes, but you can sell the design and sell the licensing. So you don't have to be a manufacturer of clothes, but you might be a licensor of designs. Or if you come up with a really good invention, it could be that the invention isn't the thing that's going to make you a billionaire, but the spin-offs from the invention are what make you a billionaire. So that sort of procrastination where you're being creative but you've hit a brick wall is because there's probably a better way and there's a learning to be had.
Yes, absolutely. So this thing about procrastination, I think it's really good to know which of the two you're in, because as you say, one of them is being given by fear. Another one is being given by a deeper knowing of some sort that says, now is not the right time, just hang out, hold on, hold that thought in a sense, the time will come when you can do this. It was a little bit like with writing my trilogy was, I really, really wanted to write it for so long. I mean, it was like I had many, many false starts. you know, but there was also this element of not quite, it's like I saw the vision, but I wasn't quite ready somehow to integrate that into anything useful that I could share in a structured fashion, you know, with other people. So there was a little bit of like that lag time where I'd seen what was coming and I was like, now, I want it now. I'm going to do it. I'm going to sit down and try. And then rubbish would come, you know.
And that's really, I tell you what's really weird, right, is because we set this interview up about a week or so ago. You sent me some example questions a couple of days ago, and I saw that one about procrastination. Tomorrow's Just for Today is entitled "Don't Be a Pro at Crastination." And so I won't spoil what is in there, but there's a dictionary called the Urban Dictionary, and you can put in your own words. So I've got several words I've made up, like
okay.
flawed, which is short for a flavour of thought, and you can register these against yourself. It's kind of all free, and someone had already registered the word crastination, and it'll be in tomorrow's Just for Today email, which is interesting. So you're being a pro at crastinating.
Interesting. So good. So being in I think what I'm hearing throughout the thread of this conversation is like, you know, when you begin to tune into the multifacets of who we are, and the multifacets, and this is why, you know, you know, the diamond element of my books, Karma and Diamonds, is very much one aspect of the diamond is the fact that this is who we truly are. And, you know, we have so many facets to who we are that it's, you know, which facet of you is looking for expression right now is really the question to ask when you're creating something, because then you get really tuned in. Now, that facet that I talked about earlier with regards to the clothes, you know, the clothing line and so on, you know, that was then, it's not now. Now something else, some other expression is coming in, you know, so it's over here somewhere. And I think it's really important to kind of ask, like, you know, you may have 3 or 4 things that your heart desires for you to do, and you want to do them all together, but actually what is really asking for you to give your time to right now by way of expression? What is asking for your expression right now in time?
And you know, there's an overarching quality that we can bring to bear on this, and that's the quality of gratitude. So just being thankful for everything. So you can be thankful this clothing line didn't take off because it might have made you not be doing what you do now. You can be thankful that the book came out 2 years after you thought it might do originally, because it's the perfect time. We can be thankful of those lovely moments of light, like the number 12 coming in when you weren't thinking. And you can be thankful for being breathing and alive on this planet at this time and sharing this journey with 7 billion people right now.
Yes.
So, because there's not many places in the universe you can do this.
Yes. Absolutely. Gratitude. You know, the sacred texts, the ancient Indian texts are full of what we call stotras. Stotras are indeed, they are, call them hymns of gratitude, hymns of acknowledgement, you know, and that's what they essentially are. They usually focus towards a deity, Lakshmi, or, you know, Durga, or a goddess, or one of those. But actually, in the end, what they are is a form of appreciation and you know, deep gratitude and honoring that being, which, what else is it other than an aspect of who we are?
Yeah, and it multiplies. As soon as you adopt an attitude of gratitude, then more stuff comes along.
Yes, yes. Yeah, very underrated. And it's good to see now that there, you know, that this conversation of gratitude is coming very much into the Western conversation. We're hearing a lot more about it, right? So you wrote light bulb moments. We mentioned it. I think we mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
So can you consciously create those moments of aha? Like, can you?
And you can also
do that.
Yeah, you can block them as well. So to me, light bulb moments are one of the best time savers ever, because they happen in less than a second. They happen outside space and time. And I wrote this book. And I published it with a publisher. They took a year to publish it, would you believe? And then I wrote my fourth book after that, and I published my fourth book before they published my third book. And then, and it took so long to publish the book that I started to get other information about light bulb moments, but I couldn't put them in the book. So I started to do talks about it. I've done several talks to corporates about how to have an idea at the top of your head and this sort of stuff. And what I looked at was the mechanisms by which a light bulb moment come in. And so we talked before about having the whole brain working together, left and right brain, and that's when you can be really creative. So I use things like mind mapping for that, because the mind map it's got detail on it the left brain gets involved with. It's got the bigger picture that the right brain gets involved with. But light bulb moments are whole mind events. So they affect all. So they come in through our crown. They shoot right down into the root. They go into the earth mind. And our root mind, our root chakra, checks in with the earth mind. Is it ecological and safe for us right now? Then it comes up to the sacral and gut minds, and they give you a green light or a red light. If you get a green light, it comes up to the heart, and you fall in love with the idea. And then it shoots into the right brain, and you see the whole picture of it. Then it goes across to the left brain, you see some of the detail. Then it comes down to your throat chakra, and you shout Eureka. So when you get one of these events, if you were inside an MRI scanner, you wouldn't just see the whole brain lighting up, you see the whole body lighting up. And all of this happens in just a flash. Now, because that's what happens, we can understand that's how it happens, they're whole mind events. If any of our chakra centers is blocked, so we don't love what we're doing, for example, or we don't trust our intuition, or we're not grounded and rooted, so our head's in the clouds, or we can't speak our truth, this will block things coming in. So having a culture inside a business where people love what they do, they're trusted, and so their guts are trusted, they can speak their truth, they can see their own mind. These are really important qualities that we need to have these light bulb moments. And I came up with this acronym called MAGIC. And the M stands for meditation, stands for meditation. So you meditate every day, you encourage light bulb moments to come in. If you associate, that's mind mapping, doing free association. That's a great way to have light bulb moments. G is generation. That's what Edison used to do. So you take an idea and you see all the things you can do with it. So, for example, the telegraph became a tattoo needle. The system for generating electricity became an electric chair that electrocuted people. So he'd come up with all these other inventions other than the thing that he originally thought of, which is the spin-off. The I of magic stands for intention. So I intend every day that I'm going to have a light bulb moment. I'm going to find serendipity, and it just pops along. And then the C stands for collaboration or co-creation. And so, people go to networking meetings and you say, oh, what do you do? And they say, oh, I'm a bookkeeper. What do you do? I'm an accountant, this sort of stuff. I used to go to networking meetings and say, what can we do? So tell me a bit about you, I'll tell you a bit about me. And then how can you put these two things together so we can create something new that wouldn't have happened before? So collaboration is very important. I do this in whole rooms of people where people never met each other, get to know each other, and they come up with these weird, wacky inventions that wouldn't have happened if those two people weren't there at the same time. So the MAGIC acronym is how you 5 ways to generate light bulb moments off the top of your head, but they're useless if you've got any blockage in your energy systems.
Can you just recap in the single word what each?
Yeah, absolutely. So M is for meditation. M is for meditation, mindfulness meditation. The A is for association. So that's free association. And the best tool to do that is the mind map. G is generation, where you just keep slogging away until you get the right idea. It's not a bad tool. And you might come up with weird spin-offs that you didn't think of before. I is the intention that you're going to have a light bulb moment or a flash of brilliance. And C is for collaboration or co-creation.
Nice. Lovely. Yeah. I love that. Love it. Love it. So you could create aha moments by doing those 5 things. And if you
any one of them or all 5 of them, yeah.
If you do them consistently, then you are setting yourself up to have those aha moments more often.
You got it. Yeah.
And you've got a course coming out, which is around that. And I want you to let people know, where can they find that course? How long is it again? Just repeat just give us the synopsis of it.
Well, the course, I've got a long URL for it, which is www.mindfulnessbasedtimemanagement.com. That's the official URL. I put that together for SEO purposes because it's got all the words in. Is also available under www mbtm.co. You'll find that an easier way to get to it. It saves a bit of time to get it that way. It's an 8-week course. It includes the audiobook version of my book, Managing Time Mindfully, which is a book written in 4 quarters with that magic number 12 again. It's an 8-week course modeled on mindfulness-based stress reduction and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. I thought it works for them with an acronym, a 4-letter acronym. It worked for me. It's an 8-week course, a module a week you take. It takes about an hour or 2 a week to go through the exercises. Doesn't matter if you miss a week, you can always come back to it because there might be a better time to do it. And then at the end of the 8-week course, you get a 21-day meditation retreat. And it's said that in 21 days, that's all it needs to rewire and refire you in a slightly different way. So 21 days meditation retreat where you meditate for 30 minutes, 33 seconds every single day. And this meditation course is a real joy. You can actually take it beforehand if you want to as well. It doesn't matter which way around you do it. But it reconfirms all the things you learn in the 8 weeks. And at the end of that, which is a sort of 11, 12-week process, you will have a completely different relationship with time, which is kind of interesting, isn't it?
Amazing.
And so it's interesting that this course is out there. I'm always surprised at how many people say, I haven't got time to do that course. And this is the gem of wisdom I'm going to share. Okay? Yeah. If I can give you a course which can give you as much time as you ever need, and by the way, it helps you rejuvenate as well, so you look better, you have more vitality, you live weller for longer, what's the reason you might not do that course? It's because if I give you the solution so you can get more things done with less time, you lose the excuse of not getting things done.
It's usually time or money, right? The excuse is
exactly. So it's very convenient to hide behind excuses, and the fact that time is linear and limited for us all is an excuse we live behind. So my challenge and my gauntlet that I like to throw down to everybody: what would you do? And this is one of the exercises in the first week. What would you do with unlimited time? So just think about that, and then come over to www.mbtm.co. I'll show you how to have unlimited time, and then you can go and make it happen. And you can be as selfish and as hedonistic as you want to be with that, or you can be as philanthropic as you want to be. I don't care. The resources are there for people to use for personal use and personal gain, or for global use and global gain. Up to you.
Amazing. Awesome. Good. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tom. I really, really appreciate this. And it's been a long time coming because we've been wanting to do this for a while. I'm really glad that we managed to catch up today. And I'm sure we will talk again.
It's my honor. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.